back, everybody, to another episode of 10-Minute Theology. We've been talking about angels, and we're going to continue to do that today with part 4 of angels. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be going through today. So angels part 4, we were talking about why were angels created. Today we're going to focus on for the nations. And we're going to ask the question, do territorial angels exist? You've probably heard that term before, especially when it comes to demonic presence. It seems like you hear about that there's a territorial demon in a certain place. Is that a biblical concept or is it not? So you see here in our menu here of why angels were created. And the next couple times we'll eventually get to they were created to praise and serve God. We skipped over that to begin with and went straight to their serving of God's creation. But we're definitely going to double back and hit that because tremendous amount of information there, just fascinating too. And I think you'll find it really educational. So as we go in here, for the nations, do territorial angels exist? Worth talking about. So let's start in the book of Deuteronomy, believe it or not. So let's just jump in. Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 through 9. So when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. So a couple things to dive into here with these two verses. Clearly, the Most High is God. Okay, so when God gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind. Now, when did God divide mankind? You got to go back to the book of Genesis. You go back to the Tower of Babel. So after the flood, remember God told them to disperse, basically go forth and populate the world, and they didn't do it. They hung out in the same place, built the Tower of Babel, and started to engage in pagan practices there. So that's what this is talking about. When he fixed the border, when he divided mankind, right? And then he divided them up by their own languages, confused their languages, and off everybody went based upon the languages that they were, of the common languages that they had with other people. So that's when that occurred. And you look at here and you notice that he fixed the borders of the people according to the number of the sons of God. Now, the ESV says sons of God. If you look in the NIV, if you look in the NASB, all the original NASB, the 95 edition, 2020 edition, and even the Legacy Standard edition now as well, it still says sons of Israel. If you'll look at the Revised Standard, it'll say sons of Israel. The King James, the New King James, says sons of Israel. And that's because they were basing their translation. So they translated the Hebrew text at the time from what's called the Masoretic text. So the Masoretic text, Hebrew translation or Hebrew version of the Old Testament written in Hebrew and Aramaic, predominantly Hebrew. And the Masoretic text actually comes from the earliest manuscript we have of that is around 10 AD. So, you're looking at 10th century AD. So you're looking around 900, right? The 900 ADs after Christ. So 900 some years after Christ is when that version of the Hebrew text we can find it is originated from. Now, if you would go back to, keep in mind, right, today, right, our version of the Bible, very few, especially in the United States, in English-speaking countries, very few people are going to be able to read Hebrew. So we need an English version of the Hebrew Bible, which we have a whole lot of different versions of them. Go back to then, and you go back before Christ, so back into 3rd, 4th century BC, they needed a Greek version of the Old Testament. So they put some scholars together, Hebrew scholars at the time, in the city of Alexandria in Egypt, and they came up with what's called the LXX, or the Septuagint. LXX meaning 70. Legend has it was 70 scholars. Septuagint, just another word for that. But it was a Greek translation of the Old Testament. In fact, the majority of the majority of the Old Testament that is quoted in the New Testament is actually from the Septuagint, or the LXX, okay? So just so you know that. The LXX actually says here, when you look at this verse, it says the sons of God. And as we've spoken of before, the sons of God is another name for angels. Okay, and when you look in the LXX, it actually says angels of God. Okay, so sons of God, angels of God. That's another way to translate this. So, and it's a great topic to dig deeper into another time. To be a little brief with it here, just know that what they're talking about here is that God fixed the borders of the peoples according to the angels that he put, the heavenly hosts that he put responsible for these different areas. So that's an interesting thing here, right? But notice the Lord's portion is his people. And Jacob was his allotted heritage. So Jacob, of course, name was changed to Israel after he wrestled with God. Remember Jacob's ladder, saw angels ascending and descending on the ladder. Jacob later had his name changed to Israel at that point. And of course, the nation of Israel was later born. Fast forward down the road a little bit, right? So interesting that right off in Deuteronomy 32, it's talking about that. Let's move on to some different verses. How about Ephesians 6? So again, are there territorial angels? Ephesians 6:12, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. So we have spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Notice that we also have against the powers, against the world forces of darkness. Okay, so you'll hear that rulers, some will put this principalities. You'll hear all those terms used. There's a hierarchy amongst the angels, also amongst the evil angels, the fallen angels as well. And you're starting to see some of that here as it talks about them, calling them rulers and powers, right? So again, talking about the heavenly realm, the spiritual realm, spiritual forces as this talks about, right, in the spirit world that we can't see all the time until they choose to manifest themselves to us. But again, Ephesians clearly is talking about that there is the sense that there are angels, that there are evil angels associated with geographical locations here, as we see where it's talking about world forces. So again, for the nations is that. Let's go on and look at another verse here as we move quickly. Okay, and that takes us to Daniel. So Daniel, there's quite, Daniel's a rich book and full of interactions with the spirit world. And as we see here in Daniel 10, verses 12 through 13. So Daniel here is having an encounter with an angel. And if you remember back in Daniel 8 and Daniel chapter 9, he has an encounter with the angel Gabriel. They even call Gabriel out by name. That Gabriel only mentioned by name 4 times in the entire Bible, 2 times in the book of Daniel, and then 2 times in the book of Luke as well. But here we're in Daniel 10. So different encounter, but yet again, he's dealing with an angelic being. And notice here Daniel says, then he being the angelic being, said to me, Daniel, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you gave your heart to understand this and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was standing against me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. Now I had been left there with the kings of Persia. Okay, so again, we see now this battle that's going on in the spirit realm. So Daniel had been praying, and you see here at the beginning in verse 12, the first day you gave your heart to understand this and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But notice, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia. So why not just say, an angelic being an evil angelic being stood against me? Notice it has locality here, the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Isn't that interesting? That specifically calling it out, the kingdom of Persia, standing against me 21 days. Notice this, then behold, Michael. So the archangel Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I have been left there with the kings of Persia. So again, there's this territorial aspect to that. There appears to be that Persia had some specific angels, and they appear to be fallen angels, evil angels that were against them, that the other angels had to come help out. If we go to the end of chapter 10, again, here we see a continuation of the conversation, so let's just jump in verse 20. Then he said, do you know why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. Again, the prince of Persia. So I'm going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. So now we have a mention of the prince of Greece. We have a mention of the prince of Persia. Again, territorial, it sounds like it. And if it's the prince of those locations, the prince angel of locations, do they have other angels under them? Okay, is about to come. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. Now, there is no one who exerts strength with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. Now, notice that Michael is called Daniel's prince. So what are they getting at there? So again, we got Prince of Persia, we had the Prince of Greece, some totality there, territorialness as we look at it, right? But then Michael is called Daniel's prince. Let's go on to the next verse. Daniel 12 now. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guards over the sons of your people, will stand, and there will be a time of distress such as never happened since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who was found written in the book, will be rescued. So notice here in chapter 12 of Daniel, again, he's talking with a heavenly being. And now he's being told at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people. Well, again, who are Daniel's people? Daniel was Jewish. Remember, he was taken in the Babylonian captivity when Babylon came down, ransacked Israel, and took them off, right? So he was carried off with them as a young boy, and a lot of time went by during that captivity, right? Remember, the captivity was going to be 70 years. So as we think about that, it's interesting. So it appears that Michael is the angel responsible for the nation of Israel. So again, Prince of Persia, Prince of Greece, Michael as well. Let's look at one more because this is pretty interesting here. Fast forward to the New Testament as we look at it, okay? Luke chapter 4, verses 5 through 6. And as we look at this, give you the context of it, Luke chapter 4, Matthew chapter 4 contain the account of the temptation of Jesus by Satan in the wilderness. Okay, so here we have Satan leading, Satan speaking here, right? And when it says he led him, Satan led him being Christ. So he led him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said to him being Jesus, I will give you all this domain and its glory, for it has been handed over to me, and I give it to whomever I wish. Now go read the rest of this account, right? This is actually the second temptation where he tried to, one temptation, right? But the second attempt that Satan had to test Jesus in the three. Go read the whole account. It's interesting, though. Jesus doesn't reply to him that, no, you're lying, right? You haven't been handed these over to me. He doesn't reply that at all. He replies with scripture, and he's not challenging the fact that Satan, problem here with the technology, there we go, that Satan has those different domains. So it's interesting when you look at it that there's no disagreement there. Now, there are some things to consider here. And not all scholars agree with this, that Satan would still have dominion over the world in this way today. Mainly because when you fast forward to Matthew 28, right, and what's Jesus saying after his resurrection when he appears to the disciples, right? He says, all authority and power has been given to me on heaven and earth. Okay, so if all authority has been given to him, did he take it back? Now, it doesn't say that he, being Jesus, took this away from Satan at that time. In fact, then, if you go to 2 Corinthians 4:2, we read there that still Paul is talking about how the minds of the unbeliever are blinded, that Satan has blinded the minds of the unbelieving still today. So it sounds like Satan clearly still has power on this earth, but again, he only has the power that he's permitted to have. Does that continue to exist over certain territories, over certain areas? It's hard to say. People differ on that. What I will say is looking at this doesn't say clearly in Luke 4, Jesus was aware of it, but after the resurrection, it doesn't say that Jesus removed that power from him. Also, fast forward to the end of the book of Revelation, chapter 20, I believe, where we read that Satan is bound and thrown into into the abyss for the 1,000 years during the millennium. At the end of the millennium, he's let out again to go deceive the nations again. So it sounds like he still has the ability to do that. Coupled that with 2 Corinthians 2, 4, 2, 2 Corinthians 4, 2 as well, where the minds of people today are blinded. There is still something going on. Does that mean that we still have territorial angels today, both good and bad? Personally, I believe so. You'll have to read it, make your own decisions for yourself. But here's the information for you. So go take a look at it, watch it a couple times, figure out, study it for yourself. It's a great opportunity to dig into God's Word. And that'll bring us to an end of part 4 of Angels. Again, Territorial Angels. Go out there, have a great week, serve Jesus Christ, and look forward to seeing you next time as we go to part 5. God bless you all. Take care. Have a great day.